Welcome once again to Anita the Pedagogue channel. Today we want to look at some grammar lessons. We want to look at transitive and intransitive verbs in English grammar. For our objectives, we are going to look at the explanation of transitive verbs, how to identify transitive verbs, how to use transitive verbs appropriately in speech and in writing. Also, we would look at what intransitive verbs mean, the explanation. We'll try and identify intransitive verbs. We'll use transitive verbs appropriately in speech and writing, and look at the difference between transitive and intransitive verbs. Now let's begin. Transitive verb. So usually when we talk about a verb, it is a doing word, a state, or an action. Some examples of eat, write, like, dance, etc. Now, what is a transitive verb? So a transitive verb is a verb that allows a noun or an object or a noun group to immediately follow it. So anytime you use a verb in a sentence and it allows you to put a noun or a noun group, that's an object, immediately after it, then that verb is a transitive verb. Now when we talk about an object, it is a person or thing that receives the action of the verb. It is the person or thing that is acted upon by the verb. Again, it means who, what the action is performed on. So let's take note of this. Let's continue and look at some examples. Some examples of transitive verbs are know, settle, open, give, cut. Now let's go on and look at how we can identify transitive verbs in the next examples we are going to see. Our first example, Omar kicked the ball. Omar kicked the ball. In this sentence, can you identify the verb? Yes, the verb is kicked. That is the action. Now, does this action allow a noun group to follow it? Or an object to follow it? Yes. So, our verb here is kicked. And the verb kicked is immediately followed by the direct object or noun, the ball. The verb kicked is therefore a transitive verb because it allows you to add a noun or a direct object immediately following it. Let's look at our second example. In this sentence, Lana is reading a speech. Lana is reading a speech. Can you identify the verb in this sentence? Good, reading. Does the verb reading allow a noun to follow it? Yes. So, our verb here is reading, and the verb reading is immediately followed by the direct object, a speech. The verb reading is therefore a transitive verb. Let's look at some further example. Christina climbed the tall mountain during the holidays. Christina climbed the tall mountain during the holidays. Can you identify the verb here? Yes, climbed. That is the action. Now, does this verb allow an object or a noun to follow it? Yes. So, our verb here is climbed, and the verb climbed is immediately followed by the noun group or the direct object, mountain, that is the tall mountain. And so, the verb climbed is a transitive verb. Let's move on and look. So our verb here is therefore a transitive verb. Now let's move on and look at intransitive verb. Now when we talk about intransitive verb, it is a verb that does not allow a noun or direct object or noun group to follow it. So this is a type of a verb that doesn't allow you to immediately follow it with a noun or an object. Let's take a look at some examples. Our first sentence, Audrey dances. So here we have our subject as Audrey performing the action dances. Now, the verb dances does not allow you to add a noun or a direct object to it. And so we can say that Audrey dances. Dances is an intransitive verb. Let's look at our second example in this sentence. My mom slept. My mom slept. So also we can see our subject here is my mom and is performing the action slept. The verb here is slept. Does the verb slept allow you to add a direct object or a noun to it? No. So slept is an intransitive verb. So far we realize that no noun or direct object follows these verbs in the sentences we have here. That is, the verbs dances and slept do not have any noun group following it. They are therefore intransitive verbs. Great. Let's move on to some further examples of transitive verbs. Let's look at this sentence. Daphne has grown old. Now the verb here is grown and it is followed by, is it followed by a noun? No, it is followed by the adjective old. The verb is not followed by a noun or a direct object, so grown is an intransitive verb. So let's take notes. Let's take a look at another example. It snows beautifully. The verb here is snows. That is the action. Now, does a noun or a direct object follow it? No, but rather beautifully is an adverb. So our verb here snow is followed by an adverb beautifully. This verb snows does not allow a noun group or a direct object to follow it. So snow is an intransitive verb. Let's move on and look at transitive and intransitive verbs. Now it is very important to take note that there are some verbs that can be used both as transitive and also as intransitive verbs. For example, the verbs eat, open, and read can serve as transitive and also intransitive verbs. That is interesting, right? Yes, that is why it is very important to always decide a verb is transitive or intransitive after you have used it in a sentence. So let's take a look at these sentences that we have under transitive and intransitive. Our first example, Patrick eats jollof. The verb here is eats. Eat is followed by a direct object, a noun, which is jollof. Jollof is a type of food, yeah. So here, it has been used as a transitive verb. Now let's take a look at the other side. Under intransitive, we have Patrick eats in the kitchen. So you realize that Patrick eats, and the verb eats is not followed by an object or a noun, but rather it is followed by a preposition in. Let's look at the next example. 2. Under transitive, the headmaster opens the door. Here the verb is opens, and it is followed by the noun, the door. That is the direct object. When we look at it at the intransitive section, we have the headmaster opens at noon. You realize that the verb opens is followed by a preposition and not a noun. And so opens is serving as an intransitive verb here. Let's take a look at our third example. Victoria read the story to the class. The verb here is read. Noun, it is followed by a noun group, a direct object, which is the story. And so it is a transitive verb. But let us look at it at the intransitive section. Victoria cannot read. Here, the verb read is not followed by a noun group or an object. And so here it is serving as an intransitive verb. So let us look at a more summarized form of this chart in our next slide. So in example 1, as a transitive verb, it is followed by the direct object jollof. However, as an intransitive verb, it is followed by the preposition in. And in our second example, as a transitive verb, opens is following a noun or the direct object, the door. However, as an intransitive verb, it is followed by the preposition at. In example 3, as a transitive verb, the verb read or read is following the noun or direct object, the story. However, as an intransitive verb, it is followed by nothing. Now let's take note of this. True transitive verbs are those which can occur as transitive verbs only. And true intransitive verbs are the verbs which never allows a noun group or object follow them. So if you are looking for a true transitive verb or a true intransitive verb, then they are the verbs which never allows a noun group or object to follow them. Now let's move on and look at the difference between transitive and intransitive verbs. So for transitive verbs, always remember they require a noun after them. But intransitive verbs do not require an object or a noun. And 2, transitive verbs can take direct or indirect objects. But for intransitive verbs, they can be followed by an adjective or adverb as complements, or even sometimes a preposition. Now let's quickly do a recap of what we've learned today. We've learned that transitive verbs are verbs that allows a noun or a direct object or noun group to immediately follow it. Also, we've learned that an intransitive verb does not allow a noun or direct object or a noun group to follow it. We've also learned that there are some verbs that can be used both as transitive verbs and also intransitive verbs. Now, on Anita the Pedagogue channel, we have other lessons, other English grammar lessons, and other literature lessons that you can take a look at. Now this brings us to the end of our lesson on transitive and intransitive verbs, and I hope this lesson was useful to you. Please put in your comments and questions and I'll respond to them. Do like, share and subscribe to this channel. Until I come your way again, keep learning and be the best version of yourself.